If you are following along in your missal, you'd likely noticed that the first option to begin this Mass, this Feast of the Presentation, includes beginning off-site. Another location in which candles are blessed. They're lit, carrying, everyone does, in their hands, processing to the church, and then finding a place in your pews. I'll modify this a little bit when it falls on a weekday, as it normally does, and we'll begin in the vestibule, and we'll bless candles and light candles, and everyone will process into the pews in a darkened church. It's quite lovely. If you've been to an Easter vigil, it's something like that. You've seen the church lit up with candlelight. Today with Call to Share, and then just the, oddities maybe of our building. Where do you begin? And then how do you get in without tripping over things? So unfortunately, we're not able to do that today, but nowadays those rituals, like that procession, or like the blessing of throats tomorrow on the Feast of St. Blaise, those rituals often seem strange and irrelevant, especially to the young. From what we do here on a weekly basis, all the way back to something like from our gospel, Mary and Joseph took Jesus to the temple to consecrate him to the Lord because he was a firstborn boy, and to sacrifice 2 turtle doves or pigeons. It seems rather absurd, at least probably to most people. So here's a way to think about it, rooted in science. See what you think about it. Research in the last several years has yielded fascinating information on the building blocks of human flourishing. From geneticists all the way to economists, a core finding is that human beings are not primarily products of conscious thought. We're not primarily products of conscious thought. Some of the most significant influences on us happen without our even being aware of it. A researcher at the University of Virginia estimates that at any given moment, the human brain can absorb 11 million pieces of information. So your spouse or your mom probably has a point when she says you could listen to me if you wanted to. Well, there's bandwidth there, 11 million pieces of information at any point. But here's the deal, we're only conscious of a fraction of this. Jonathan Sachs wrote that much of our behavior is driven by instincts that lie beneath conscious awareness and the rational reflective part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. The question then arises, how, if our instincts are largely unconscious, can we change them? Good question. The short answer, he says, is ritual. Ritual is behavior that bypasses the prefrontal cortex. It's action based not on a rational decision that this is how we should act. Rather, it's behavior that follows a precise set of rules, a fixed choreography. During certain acts repeatedly, genuflecting over and over and over as you come into the church, for example, by doing those acts repeatedly, we form new habits of the heart that work at an unconscious level to form new patterns of instinctual behavior. It's what writers and artists and athletes do all the time. Go through the ritual, it trains them deeply. He says, prayer engenders gratitude. Daily charitable giving makes us generous. The thou shalt not of religion teach us self-control. Ritual changes the world by changing us. The heart follows the deed, says Sefer Hanukkah. It's like what C.S. Lewis said. You don't feel like you love that person? Well, act like you love them. Act like a loving person does, and your emotion will catch up with your actions, and you'll begin to feel that you love them. That's great, isn't it? All right. So what's happening, or what happened with Mary and Joseph and Jesus at a subconscious level and all those who participated in that ritual? The law said that every firstborn male is to be consecrated to the Lord in a sacrifice of 2 turtle doves or pigeons. But that was the exception to the law. it was the exception for poor people. The law said, offer a lamb and a dove. A lamb and firstborn, those words direct us all the way back to Egypt, to the Israelites in slavery, when Pharaoh decreed that all the firstborn males should be killed by the midwives. And when that didn't work, well, they should be tossed into the Nile. They should be drowned in the water. And how were they delivered? What they were delivered is, remember, through Moses and the number of plagues. And the last one was the destroyer that came through and killed whom? All the firstborn of the land. All creatures that existed outside a house that had the blood of a lamb smeared on the doorposts and the lintels. So what's being communicated ritually, subconsciously in the presentation at the temple? Well, don't forget the horrible place you were in. And don't forget that it was only through the Lord's deliverance that your firstborns are not being put to death. And don't despair when life seems unfair. Justice will ultimately be done. The Egyptians plotted to kill all the firstborn. Their firstborns died. And just in case you're tempted, don't think that justice won't eventually catch up with you if you engage in evil. But there is a cost in bringing about justice. A spotless lamb, turtle doves, and ultimately Jesus. This child is destined for the rise and the fall of many. He'll be a sign that's contradicted. He says that's love, we say it's not. And then if we were to participate in that candlelight procession, what are we saying? We come into the temple. Our humanity has been brought into the great temple. We bear light. He is the light to the Gentiles. We've been enlightened by him. And then if you'll listen closely as you come forward for communion, you'll hear Simeon's words. My eyes have seen the salvation that the Lord has prepared for me as you receive Holy Communion. Now, friends, we could, quite frankly, be intermittent in our participation in the ritual, or just not participate in these at all. And by so doing, our life becomes more and more limited down to that bare sliver that we're conscious of. But God, well, he works through what he has bequeathed to us to break us open, put us into contact with the Simeons of the world, so that the heart follows the deed. May the world be changed by ourselves being changed through the rituals and practices we've received.